All right, ladies and gentlemen, is anything important or exciting going on in our country today? Something like this, and voting, and polls, and swing states, and precincts, and yes, in college football, we have our first unveiling of the 12-team college football playoffs. Number one being the Fighting Dan Lannings, or Mighty Oregon Ducks. And really no surprises here. Everyone kind of had assumed the Alabama would be that 1-2 loss team. And then let's just really focus on this breakdown on you have four Big Ten teams: Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana, the Hoosiers. Then we have four SEC schools: the Georgia Bulldogs, Texas Longhorns, Tennessee Volunteers, and of course your Alabama Crimson Tide. So as expected, 8 out of 12, do the math, 2/3. Man, such a disparity, right? With two conferences having four. Is it just right to assume that in the Big 12 championship, or the Big 10, Big 10 championship game right now, as it is, Indiana Hoosiers play Oregon Ducks in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium, which just had Taylor Swift concert. Not related to this conversation, but fun fact. Or if you are in the SEC in Atlanta right now, believe it or not, boys and girls, especially you may not like this for some folks in my great state of Texas, the Georgia Bulldogs are going to play the Gig'em Aggies. That's how it is right now, just because the Aggies have 5 SEC wins. Think just like politics or swing states or too close to call. Is it too close to call, though? We know this is going to change. We know the SEC championship will be able to whittle down to 2 teams. It could be hard, though. It could be really hard. And even in the Big Ten, there is a monumental game coming up in a couple weeks, and both in the SEC, when you have Georgia and Tennessee, and then Ohio State and Indiana. So lots of chaos could happen. But what's the chaos that could happen with these top-ranked teams, especially like a Georgia and a Tennessee? Can one of them lose and still be okay? In terms of they're more likely than not going to get into the national, or getting into their conference championship game, and then even if they are even if they're second place, silver medal, they'll be okay. They'll be in, and let's play some ball in December. And so let's look at that. Who's in the driver's seat? Let's talk about, I think the clear leader in the clubhouse for the Southeastern Conference is going to be our Georgia Bulldogs. And let's not get into right now in this very second how they looked in that game, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. And, Carson Beck throwing 3 interceptions. Let's not worry about that. I would love to. Let's save that conversation for another day or the next round of drinks. But right now, I think with just perception and quality wins, I don't think anybody is going to say that Georgia hasn't proven their mettle and who they are and what they're about. Okay, I don't think anybody wants to play that defense. Now, who are they going to? If let's say they win out, or now can Georgia lose to Tennessee and still get into the SEC championship game? Well, this is where things could get very interesting. Again, we have A&M, Tennessee, LSU, and Texas all sitting at 1 losses. High probability one of those teams will all win out. And the thing that the scenario that I see Georgia being okay is Georgia can lose. Hold on, what did I say here? Georgia can lose. I think if Bama loses, right, because Bama beat Georgia, I think if Bama loses and Georgia loses, because if Bama loses to LSU, that's it. I think we can all conclude to that. But if Georgia loses and then Bama loses, I think that's going to kind of eliminate one contender, right? It's going to, get them out of the picture. And it'll probably bring in SMU. SMU just, a couple miles down the road from where I'm speaking right now. They are knocking at the door. Another scenario, let's flip that. Can Tennessee lose to Georgia and be fine? And I think this goes, so I think Bama has a lot to play with it because it's always that comparison. And why that's important is not for the fan, is for how the committee would look at those quality wins. It's just comparison, transitive property. Did this, you beat them because you beat that. We all do that. Okay, so that same psychology and effect or analysis is going on in these committee meetings. I think if Tennessee were to lose to Georgia, but Bama beats LSU and finishes out strong, I can see Tennessee being okay, and I'm sure between Georgia and Bama, one of those will either get into or not get into the SEC championship game, and then all the chips will fall as they will. Another scenario that I think would actually would help Georgia here is if Texas were to win out. If Texas wins out, that means A&M would probably get bounced out of the SEC championship game, and then for sure Georgia could lose to Tennessee. Maybe still find a way to get into that SEC championship game. So everything is going to be contingent on who is actually playing, because let's just assume they're in. And then depending on how the losses shape up between LSU and Bama this weekend, between Texas and A&M. Obviously, if A&M were to beat Texas, I think Texas is done. Okay, so there's that one scenario, but that's a few weeks away. And so those are two big games in the SEC to really look forward to. So it'd be Georgia, this Saturday, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The Crimson Tide of Bama versus the Tigers of LSU. And then the following weekend in Sanford Stadium, between the hedges, the Georgia Bulldogs versus good old Rocky Top. Woo! Rocky Top, Tennessee. Can't wait for that. And then the following week, I believe on the 23rd, let's switch to the Big Ten. And then obviously the Texas A&M, Kyle Field, renewing the Lone Star rivalry. Is anyone excited for that? Anyone excited for that game? Okay, let's switch to the Big Ten. So my conference just saw the Fighting Dan Lannings a couple weeks ago. Go check out that video. Okay, I wasn't even thinking about this. So huge win for Penn State, or excuse me, I hate saying this. Huge win for the Buckeyes over the Nittany Lions. Same story every year. Penn State's offense falters in the second half. Ohio State doesn't make mistakes, or they just turn on the jets and pull away. Well, let's check Ohio State's. They don't have it here, but I'm pretty sure it's the 23rd. I'm pretty sure it's the 23rd that Ohio State will play Indiana. I'll double check our tickets on sale here. Yes. Saturday, November 23rd in Columbus, Indiana, Ohio. So, what needs to happen in that game? Obviously, if Indiana beats Ohio State will be at 2 losses. And if Ohio State at 2 losses, Penn State wins out, Penn State's only at 1 loss, believe it or not, kids, I could see Ohio State falling below Penn State in the rankings, potentially knocking them out. Again, another way for the Ponies. And again, let's just give it up for SMU. Can anyone just, and we'll talk about them more later on in our crazy domino scenario, but can we just highlight the job that Coach Rhett Lashley and staff have done there in 2 seasons? Not lost a conference game in both years. They're in new conferences. Is there any precedent for that? And certainly with just the hardest thing's recruiting. Like, you would think it would be better or easier, and I can assure you that with uncertainty and roster management, especially as we go from switch conferences and change the rules of NIL and transfer portal, that is a remarkable accomplishment. Just winning football, baby. That's from Coach Harbaugh. All right, so if Ohio State loses, I think Penn State jumps over, and I could honestly see Ohio State not being in the playoff because of SMU. Obviously, that if Miami beats SMU, forget about it. All of these SMU scenarios are out the door. If Coach Cristobal this year, phenomenal. Almost lost a close one there to Cal in what do you call that place? HOTT? No, OTTO. Cade Ott. I think that's his name. All right, back to the Big Ten. All right, who else is Penn State okay? This is where I think is a great argument from this initial release of the college football playoff is who's ranked too high, who's ranked too low. I think Penn State's ranked too high. I think they should be ranked maybe just above Alabama, just above Notre Dame. And I think BYU at number 9 is ranked a little too low. I think BYU needs a little more respect for running the table in their conference, for having beaten SMU at their place. I was at that game, by the way. That was one of the most ugly games, and that there was a touchdown scored right away, and then everything else was field goals and turnovers, and definitely one of those early week 2, week 3 type games between two tough, proven winning programs. And would love to see how both of the teams would play each other later on down the road. But yeah, is Penn State ranked a little too high? Sure. Now, they do have a better strength of schedule than some of those other folks, whether it be Tennessee or... and yeah, of course, every year there's always going to be your 50% of the country. They hate Notre Dame, right? Why are they in this? Why are they in that 10th spot? It happens every year. Look at their schedule. They did beat A&M. A&M win looks pretty solid. And then they will play USC for their final game of the year. Certainly the little bit of struggles with the Fighting Lincoln Rileys in Troy, USC Trojans. But do not write the Notre Dame schedule as they're going to win out and get in. This kind of relates to my crazy domino scenario that I've been, what needs to happen if this team falls and that team falls and then this team gets in. So, the most obvious is if SMU were, all things being equal, SMU beats Miami in the ACC championship game. Everything else is equal. However, whoever wins the Big Ten, whoever wins the SEC, doesn't matter. In this case, Miami is not staying in there. There's not going to be 2 ACC teams, and the same is true for BYU. And again, BYU is an automatic bid, so whoever wins the Big 12, whether it is Iowa State, maybe Colorado is trending. I mean, heck, you saw Texas Tech beat Wreckham Raiders. You saw Texas Tech beat Iowa State at Jack Trice Stadium. So Big 12 is always wide open, but certainly a lot of credit does need to go to Kalani Sitake and the BYU Cougars for the work they've done so far. A month left to go here. A lot of ball left. Okay, so another way SMU can get in, would be I've kind of outlined a lot of those scenarios with whether or not Bama sticks around, if Tennessee knocks off Georgia, does Georgia at 2 losses stick around? That's another great question. Another thing is if Notre Dame were to lose to USC, and you never write off those end of game seasons, especially when there's quote unquote nothing on the line. So it doesn't look like USC will contend for a title. USC's on their bye week now. They've lost a bunch of games. 4 of the last 5, I believe. And remember, USC did beat LSU first game of the year in Vegas. But let's not assume Notre Dame's going to win that game. That's going to knock Notre Dame out of it, and it's going to immediately bump whoever's next, whether that is SMU. Could I foresee, all things being equal, Miami and SMU? Let's say SMU gets into the ACC championship, and for whatever reason, Notre Dame is bumped out. I say yes. And I'm very biased because I watched that SMU BYU game, but I don't have a lot of cognitive dissonance in my mind because you still have 4 SEC teams. You can't put a 5th SEC team in there. And we'll save that argument and that whole debate and dialogue for another day of, again, is this really college football or is this just Big Ten versus SEC? Look at the media contracts, look at the recruiting, look at the money these guys are making, yada yada. So many things you can talk about. Okay, what else did I want to talk about? Yeah, so in Ohio State, I've mentioned that a couple times. I think an Ohio State loss to Indiana would bump them out of the playoffs. I really do, because it would certainly bump them below Penn State. And I don't think you can have Ohio State at 2 losses and Alabama at 2 losses. Let's say Alabama wins out again. If they win the SEC, it's automatic. Outside chance of them getting into the SEC championship game. A lot of chips would have to fall in their place, but I definitely think Alabama would if Alabama wins out for whatever reason, would not get into that SEC championship game. I don't see how they're not in this final 12. But I don't see Ohio State surviving that fate. So if they lose, even though they've beaten Penn State, and even though their loss was to number 1 Oregon, that's a crazy scenario. And I'm going to end it on that because we could go on for just hours and hours on all these hypothetical scenarios. And let's think of let's really finish on that note of, like the election, these rankings are going to change, and these are, I'm going to say this to everybody loud and clear, these are subjective, eye level. Yes, bias is going to be in it. Yes, you're doing comparisons of schedules and how many from this can you have versus how many of that. It's not going to be perfect. You would almost say it's easier to just kick out everybody else and only narrow it down to 4, which half the time was 2 SEC teams anyways. So in that case, it's a little bit better, hopefully a little more parity. Love seeing all these Big Ten SEC schools. Just really excited for how the SEC, because no freaking clue how it's going to turn out. Once again, LSU, Bama this week, Georgia, Tennessee the following week, and then Texas A&M, Kyle Field. That's going to be our season. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Hope everyone had a fantastic election day. And speaking of that, let's update X and any crazy news. If you're still watching towards this last second, it says Fox News. It's been fascinating to watch the energy in the room increase as the odds moved in favor of Trump. This is about 10-15 minutes ago. Yeah, X is great. Thank you, Elon. Have a good night.